Go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we'll have a roll call, please.
Fitzwater. Graham.
Here.
Henry. Hussey.
Here.
Kimna.
Here.
Mihalovich.
Here.
Prather.
Here.
Schreiber.
Here.
Ward. Weissman.
Present.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
since this side outweighs that side, I think anything that we say vote on tonight, we're going to pass. They don't even get a vote tonight. So you guys just non-existent tonight. Yeah, you guys non-existent tonight. Yeah.
We'll come sit over there. Hey, Steve will be over here if I need him. He'll fill it. See, you guys are back.
Yeah, I don't know if I can entertain that motion to start with. Before we start, are there any items that we reviewed, the forecasts and the other budgets that you'd like to re-review before we proceed? Okay, is there anything from the Finance Department or directives from you all?
No.
Okay, then it looks like we're at the fire. Chief Schofield, I think you're up to bat.
I'll just kind of mention a few things as they bring up the slideshow. I was able to prepare 79 slides. Just kidding. No slides. Yeah. Did not prepare any slides, but be happy to try to answer any questions as we go through. I'm going to start out with performance measures, if that works for everybody. So if you want to turn to that in the budget book, I believe it's page 128, if my book is the same as yours. So one of the things to highlight in the performance measure category for us is the training hours. If you remember last year, we had a discussion and a pink sheet item that would allow us to compensate firefighters who would be attending classes outside of their normally scheduled shifts. And we kind of call that generically training wages, and that's, you can see the outcome of that in 2017 numbers. And our 6-month numbers halfway through the year are almost equal to, in fact, they're exactly equal. I had to check that number 6 times. They're exactly equal to the total numbers in 2016. So we're on track to double our training hours, and that's a big accomplishment. Many of the classes that firefighters participate in are multi-day classes, and they're only scheduled to work a portion of those days. And so by us being able to compensate them on the days that they're not scheduled to work, that really makes it so much easier for them to attend and to get those very, very important training requirements and achieve those professional standards. So I just want to voice my appreciation for that, and that is included in this year's numbers. So moving on down, if there aren't any other questions in the outcome category, we'll move on down to the efficiency and effectiveness indicators. And there's a new one in there, and number 5 in that second category, total system response time, is actually a new measure for us this year. And what that incorporates that we haven't really demonstrated before is not only our travel time, not only our turnout time in the station, but the third piece to that is the time that the call is received at Jeff City Police Communications and then processed for us. So what that really represents is the time that someone answers the phone, the 911 call, to the time that the fire company arrives on the scene. And that is the total, we call that total system response time. And so we started a conversation really about 1.5 years ago with communication operators and talked about ways we could improve that response time, because it does impact how quickly we're able to intervene in an emergency situation. So I think for us that's been a really positive experience. We actually started driving that number down in 16, so you probably don't see the true effect. It's kind of jumped up a little bit, I would say, and we're having conversations now trying to figure out how we can reduce all 3 components of that time to make it go to the goal, really, the projected goal for us in 2018 of 7 minutes. And that's a very, I think, achievable goal, but it's also a little bit aggressive for us to make sure that we can try to drive those numbers down as low as we can get them. Any questions on response time, travel time, total system response time? Moving on down into the other categories, we continue to try to limit the number of responses that we make. We try to do that in really two ways. One is the acuity of the call, meaning how critical the nature is, and we've worked a lot with EMS as well as the communication center and the operators there to send us on ones that we actually have a need for fire personnel to intervene. So we try to screen those calls better, and we've really worked hard with ambulance service to do that. And then the other category is redundancy. If there's already medical site on staff, we try to encourage them to use on-site medical staff at facilities or institutions that have those, because we're kind of a third wheel at that point. We want to avoid those calls and keep our vehicles and personnel in service to respond to other emergencies. So even with all those limiting initiatives, we still see an upward trend in numbers. I think we're trying to control that growth in number of incidents, but we're still seeing about 5,000 per year is the number that will probably be achieved this year, and probably slightly more maybe in 2018. Other than that, one thing that may be a cause for, you may think, concern, but I would say is not, is the number of public education and fire prevention events. You can see that in 2016 we had 261, and we only had 52 halfway through the year. And that really is representative of kind of our big push in the summer months to do public prevention programs at events like Thursday Night Live, kids events, outdoor events throughout the community. But then our really big push comes in September and October for Fire Prevention Month, and we hit every school, and we do smoke detector installs and a number of other things, and this year will be no exception. I think that we'll well exceed that number in 2017 also. Any questions that I can answer in the measures category?
Councilman Hussey.
I just have one on the number of incidents. You said things are trending upwards, but that 2404 is really 7.5 months worth of data. Do you see a spike in the second half of the year usually?
Actually, for us, that's only 6 months of data for us.
That's just 6.
Yeah, we kept, I'm not sure if we kept everything half.
Okay.
Half of the budget year is what we used for our numbers. So we try to make that easier for computational purposes. And I'm not sure if that reflects, it should have read for us, I believe it was May 1st.
So usually our incidences usually kind of spread out equally month to month, or do you see a spike?
We see some trends, but typically in the form of structure fires and fire suppression, we really see those trends jump up in the fall as people are starting to heat their homes, or fire up gas appliances that they haven't for some time, and then there's also open burning and those kind of things.
I was just going to say you might end up down this year from like
we
your
might.
efforts to reduce incidents might be working.
Yeah,
As
we
opposed
hope
to
so. I
going
mean,
the other way.
we're trying.
So.
We're trying to do that.
And then, can I follow back up on the response time? Is there kind of a the 7 minutes is in the 2018, but is there kind of a standard that you'd like to be at? And then, if we're not there yet, what's the cost associated potentially with getting to that standard?
Yeah, it's a really complex question, but
Yeah.
I'll try to answer the best I can. There's two things that are not included in that, what I call system response time. And the first one is on the front end. It takes a person to recognize there's a problem. They have to detect that there's a fire, or they have to realize that someone's having a serious medical emergency, and they have to make that phone call. We don't know what that time is. It's very difficult. There's no way to really judge that. But there's that time that's really unaccounted for. And then there's the other piece of that, which we are trying to really acquire and track, and that is from the time that we set the parking brake and radio that we're on the scene, there's a certain amount of time for us to make our way to a patient who needs us, or for us to stretch our hose lines and get water on fire. And so for us, that's a time that we think we can achieve, or we can document and then work on. And so we just had that conversation internally as a department about how we're going to track that better and then try to reduce that amount of time too. So when you look at that total number, realistically, from the time an incident actually occurs to the time we are intervening to make a difference, realistically, it's probably about 10 minutes, just to be fair and completely honest. So that's a long time, and anything we can do to reduce even just seconds in that series of events, we're going to try to capitalize on and minimize. So to answer, there is some national standards. We try to apply those whenever we can, but to make those numbers better, there's a number of different things that can be done. Strategic location of resources. There is efficiencies in design. We always encourage, the efficiency in travel, making sure we're looking at where the congested routes are, making sure that we know our territory very well and can navigate efficiently through it. So there's any number of things, and we're looking at all of them. Yep.
Councilman Kimna? Okay, Councilman Graham.
Yes, Chief, I just have a question as it relates to responding to incidents. And I've been asked this question before, and I'm sure that others probably have too, so you get a chance to answer it for on the record. If someone calls 911 or calls for the EMS, the fire trucks, the big fire trucks roll to the scene, what is the purpose of that if the EMT is already there and the fire trucks still have to respond? So
that's a good question, and we hear that quite a bit too. And so all of our personnel are trained as either EMTs or paramedics, and many of them have worked. Like I used to work on an ambulance when I was in college, and many of them have as well, and some of them still do. But we know that we can usually respond and arrive about 5 minutes is our average. We actually ran those numbers about a year ago. We kind of did a trial study for about 6 months, and what we found was that the fire truck usually arrived about 5 minutes before EMS. Not in every case, but in most cases. And so we feel like that 5 minutes is kind of a critical juncture, in terms of I would say life safety. And in the emergency medical community, they say that time is tissue, in terms of heart tissue, brain tissue, bleeding control, those kind of things. So we feel like that 5 minute window is critical. We also know that if somebody is having a serious medical problem, it takes more than 2 people on that ambulance to really address that issue. It's not like TV. It's typically not as clean or easy, simple as it may first appear. We work very, very well with the ambulance and support their operation once they arrive. And so we feel like that's the best way to get not only a good outcome, but also really, really high quality patient care.
Just if I could, just as follow-up, you want to address the revenue piece of that?
Yeah, I sure can. So as part of that, we do receive an annual payment, or have in the last 3 years. We've gone before the county commission, and as part of their funds for first responder services, which is probably the best way to classify what we do, they do pay an annual, or have in the past, paid an annual payment of $25,000 to the city for our support of that first responder program.
Okay, because that's really the major question that I've been receiving is that, why would you use this gas and time and all that to respond to an incident where EMS is already there and it's already taken, they've already taken control of the situation. So glad to hear that there is a reimbursement that's being given back to the city for that. So,
and I would add that most communities, especially progressive, larger communities, even much smaller than us, around the country, have adopted a similar model, and that really has become kind of the gold standard and kind of the expectation. Most folks we talk to say that if they've never experienced it, they don't understand or comprehend. But typically, if they've had an experience, they say, "Wow, I never realized how important that was." Yeah. Yep.
Councilman Shriver?
Chief, when you talk about the response time, sometimes when the fire service is able to be there before EMS, there are those times when they're at a status 0, I believe, because of other transports and so on and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is, and at times there is extended response times for the ambulance based on any number of reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so if there aren't any other questions on performance measures, I think we'll move on to the pink sheet request. The first item that we had as the highest priority was an inflatable rescue boat, and for us, the inflatable boat kind of serves two purposes in the fire department fleet, and it really is the ideal tool for rescue of stranded or distressed personnel in a number of different water-based scenarios. The boat that we have currently is 19 years old, and we've tried to repair it 3 times, the inflatable boat that we have. And the last time we tried to use it, we actually arrived on the scene and it wouldn't hold air. It was completely deflated. So to me, I kind of made a personal vow then that I would not let that happen again. So that's why we put it as our number 1 priority for this year. It also supports, you may think, well, we have a big boat, and we do have what we consider more of a river boat, more of a metal, flat-bottom boat, and it works great on the Missouri River. What it doesn't do very well is it doesn't do well in swollen creeks and other tributary waterways because it is very large, and it's the right tool for the Missouri River. Unfortunately, it is not at all the appropriate tool for those other scenarios, those floodwater scenarios. The good thing about the inflatable boat is that it can really be used both. And it's a best practice for us to, when we put a boat on the river, to also have a secondary boat available, if not close by. So we really want to have this boat serviceable and ready as kind of the backup, even on the Missouri River. And it's important probably to also recognize that in addition to rescue and response, we also assist the Highway Patrol in recovery operations. We also do some standby and public relations events. We'll be out next week with the MR 340 as it comes through town. There's a lot of those events that we want to be proactive and be on the river, ready to respond. But it's also, I think, good to represent Jeff City in that way. So be happy to answer any questions on the inflatable boat. I might also add that I know the number seems high. I know that $35,000 seems like a lot for a boat, but it's not only the boat, but it's also all the other accessories, the motor, the trailer, and potentially some personal protective equipment that comes with that boat. The other funded item in the pink sheet list was the copy machine. You know, this is one of those things I almost hate putting in a request for because it seems like I would rather the money go somewhere else. Unfortunately for us, this copy machine has served its use, and its lifespan has been fully realized. In fact, even after we wrote this request, the maintenance guy came out and he said, I've never seen one of these before. He said, I don't have parts for this. Can't even support it. So it is unfortunately a high priority to get replaced, and it does get a tremendous amount of use. Are there any other pink sheet items that you would like to explore any further?
Proceed.
Okay.
I guess my question is, sorry, real quick on the copy machine. Do we purchase those kinds of equipment individually, or do we have a contract with a company to provide copiers, printers, and those sorts of things, and then?
Well, it depends on what the different departments' needs are.
Okay.
We do tag on to the statewide contract, but it just depends on what the specifications are.
Okay.
We do bid it out or get 3 quotes, usually for the price.
Yeah, and I guess what I was thinking, sometimes large organizations, you work with a vendor here in town that provides all your equipment, they service the toner. It's almost like you lease those sorts of things, but maintenance agreement. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. But, and so like, I guess I look at this and think like, these are the kind of purchases that I didn't know if we were kind of monitoring these sorts of things on a citywide basis, so that the purchase of a copier really wouldn't be a fire department pink sheet as much as it is some sort of operations pink sheet for the city.
It's actually done through the IT department, but
Okay.
the funding for it
Yeah.
is in the fire department.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have, if I could, on the pink sheets, one more item before we move from there. I have had some questions offline about the vehicle, and so maybe if it's okay with the council, I'd like to maybe examine that just a little bit more fully, and why it's so much more than other vehicles in the budget line item. And you can see there that it's a fire department vehicle replacement. For us, we also, like other departments, move vehicles around within the fleet. And typically, we purchase them in such a way that they're flexible enough that we can do that. And that's how we get the lifespan that we need to out of them. This would ultimately replace a vehicle that's 12 years old. And so it's sometimes longer than others. And while the miles may not be as high, a lot of times our vehicles are idle on the scene, especially a command vehicle like this. Will go to a response and then be operational outside in idle mode. So it's not really accumulating miles, but it is still getting the wear and tear. The other thing that is different about our request than other departments is that it includes a number of different technological additions. Radios are probably the biggest. The radios that we put into these vehicles are not only mobile but also portable. So there's two types of radios. And for us to do what we need to do on an incident scene, we've got to control that with multiple radio frequencies and heads in different places. And that does make it very expensive. We also add a command box in the back to carry extensive amounts of gear and equipment, flashlights, light boxes, vehicle repeaters, metal console, seat covers, fire extinguishers, the striping, all the miscellaneous wiring and connectors. So I realize the number seems high, and I guess that's kind of why I'm feeling the obligation to explain it a little more fully. We also use these as tow vehicles, so they tow trailers like a boat trailer, like any number of other utility trailers we have in our fleet. And typically they may have heavy use the first 3 or 4 years, and then we try to rotate them to more lighter use, logistical support. But by the time we get done with them, at 12 to 13, last year it was 15 years, they're used up and consumed, and we can't move any of that equipment that we've put on there to a new vehicle because it's also reached its lifespan. So there's very little recycling that we can do, of that added equipment. Be happy to answer any questions on that if there are any.
Yeah, Council Lady Ward.
I don't have a question regarding that, but thank you for the information. Mine is in regards to priority number 5, the burn building. I know we had a lot of discussion last year in regards to that building, and I was just wondering what its current condition is, what you see its lifespan being, and if you think that will affect the future of our summer fire school training that's held here each year.
I do feel like it's important, that building's important for summer fire school. It's also important for us, day to day doing fire training, and then regionally as we host other classes outside of fire school. The problem with the building is it really hasn't received much, even though it's received a lot of hard use. We've tried to keep it up and replaced panels, but when you burn inside of a building, it's very difficult to maintain over the lifespan that we have. We had a structural engineer look at it this year, and his response was, I can write this either way. If you want to keep using it, you might be able to squeeze another year out of it, but you really need to look at replacing it. And so that gave us a lot of concern. It was kind of like, I might be able to certify it for you for one more year, but that's probably about it. So, the full replacement of that building, and again, we separate the burn building and the drill tower, they're connected. They're all the same complex there at Hyde Park. But ultimately, we're going to have to do something at some point in the future.
So is this amount for a Band-Aid, or is it for replacement?
It would be for replacement of the burn building section, but not the drill tower. So the entire structure itself, you're probably looking at $600,000 to $700,000. Joplin just built one last year for $20 million. So I mean, you can spend as much as you want, but for us to do what we need to do, that's probably the ballpark. We felt like this was a workable number based on some information we have. We probably haven't fully developed that number to tell you exactly yet, to be honest.
Did you say 20 million?
I did.
On a burn building?
It's an entire complex,
Oh,
but it's a
my.
very sophisticated training site, and it includes both Joplin Police and Fire.
Okay.
Yeah, 20 million.
Wow.
Any other questions?
So we can move on to line items if that's the
Yes,
pleasure of
yes,
the
please.
chairman. So really not a lot of major changes in line items. I guess the only one that I would call out, which is a little more significant, is the one that's on the clothing expense. And that one, the request was funded by the city administrator and the mayor, and it's for a $20,000 increase in that line item. And what that would cover for us would be additional bunker gear replacement. The bunker gear ensemble with helmet, pants, coat, hood, suspenders, and boots is about $2,500 per person. And so we try to keep those in good working order. They do have a lifespan, and they also are more susceptible to less protection as they age. So we have to keep those in good shape, and we've had a really hard time keeping up with 75 uniformed folks and all of their bunker gear needs. We try to clean it more often because it has been proven that bunker gear is a source of carcinogen contamination for firefighters. So we're washing it a lot more, which also makes it break down sometimes a little bit quicker over time. It's just more use. We also train a lot, and we do have a lot of operational requirements. So when you add all that together, trying to keep people in bunker gear at that price point has been a struggle. So we are very appreciative that was funded for the 2018, at least at this point, budget process. Are there any other line items that you guys would like me to discuss?
I don't see any. Go ahead and proceed.
I think the other budget that's included in there is the fire museum, and that really just continues to cover utilities and the basic natural gas, electricity, and water fees. We are very, very close to completing phase one of that project. We have a little more electrical work to do, but I would, as always, welcome you out there. It is transformed. If you haven't been in there, even really in the last probably 6 months, excuse me, it's really looking good, and I'm really excited about that project. And I'm really excited about phase two of that project and converting the old animal shelter, into a fire prevention and education platform.
Do you have a projected date when it might be a good time for us to go out there?
I think we could schedule something anytime.
Okay.
And we are kind of, I'll say that we're open by appointment. We still have a few things, like I said, we're working on to get to that point where we have scheduled hours. But we have hosted some events there, and certainly we welcome anytime anybody wants to come by to make an appointment.
Is Captain Young one of your...
He's on our board, yes.
on the board? Okay.
He says, now he tells me he has 10 books left, and when they're gone, they're gone. There'll be no more reprinting. So if you want a history book, you need to go ahead and get one.
Got a copy.
The only thing I would say in closing is that we do recognize and appreciate the support from council for the fleet replacement plan that we were able to put into place this year. And I speak for the entire department when I say thank you for that.
Any further questions for Chief Schofield? I think you're off the hook. Thank you very much. Okay. Are we prepared for Public Works or Planning and Protective Services, rather, next?
Well, I think planning would be more prepared, ready to go.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my first time to this exercise, so bear with me. I do have slides. I have 8 accounts, as you can see up here, and I have about 9 more slides after this one, so I will try to make them short but to the point. Excuse me. Overall, we have 4 divisions. You can see them up there. I'm not going to go through them, but altogether we have, if you include a placeholder grant, we have about $2.5 million in our total budget, including that placeholder grant, which is our community development block grant. We bring in grants about $534,000, and then we also, in fees and permits and things like that, cost recovery of about $409,000. We have 24 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. There we go. The easiest one is administration. 3 full-time staff, myself and 2 administrative staff. We support, the whole department supports several different commissions and boards throughout the city. You'll notice in our budget the big line item that changed is we went from 4 persons down to 3, and that was basically a transfer from one of our administrative technicians from administration into the building regulations division. We're trying to keep track of our cost and our cost recovery in that division. That person has the same duties, which were the majority, if not 90%, working with the building regulations division. So the major difference in our administration budget is in that one item. About 92% of this whole budget item goes to personnel cost. The other costs are mainly under materials and supplies. I believe that's about $12,000 total for gas. And then we also have a professional services contract that covers a transcription for hearings and other items like that. You can see the performance measures up there. Basically, the division director's rate, my predecessor, myself, since kind of split the time into there, and we're looking pretty good there in terms of our actual meeting our goals or exceeding them. And I'd be glad to answer any questions on this one item. If you recall, planning and the MPO were sort of now under one position, a planning manager. For budgeting purposes, I believe it's still wise to keep them as 2, so I'm going to kind of cover them as 2 different items. Current planning and long-range planning activities are handled by this division, or excuse me, this one account in the planning services division. It has 1 staff member. About 3/4 of the budget is covered by that 1 staff member. The other expense, a large one, is the dues to the Mid-Missouri Regional Planning Commission. They do provide us a service. They actually develop the Cole County Hazard Mitigation Plan on a regular cycle. They also administer and coordinate the Regional Homeland Security Council, at which we pursue grant opportunities from. They also work with the Chamber of Commerce on economic development activities and support them on various issues like that. And then there's another, they're performing a task that I'll get in later, but they're actually working on it now for supporting the Community Development Block Grant Program. Let's see here now. Another expense we have is advertising. Whenever we have public hearings, we have to advertise for Planning and Zoning Commission and to the council. Sometimes that fluctuates quite a bit depending on if there's a lot of cases coming through or if there's not. And then other than that, our budget is pretty much the same on this one item. You can see our performance measures are doing pretty good there in terms of staff recommendations being approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission and also by the City Council. And I'd be glad to answer any questions or go through any sort of line items.
Okay.
The Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, That is a federally mandated requirement for urban areas that have more than 50,000 people in it. It's a multi-jurisdictional board that has representatives from Holt Summit, Callaway County, Cole County, St. Martin's, Wardsville, Taos. All those jurisdictions are within the planning boundaries for long-range transportation purposes, primarily for monitoring and making sure there's public involvement activities with the expenditure of federal funds that may flow down through grants to the local communities, and also for MoDOT projects and things like that. The board of directors, what they do is they annually develop a work program and a budget, and that is approved by them, and then it goes through this process here. It is 80% federally funded, 5% by Cole County through a memorandum of understanding, and then Jefferson City pays 15% of that whole $358,000. There's 3 staff paid out of this one item, and I'd like to note that we're beginning to do a long-range planning activity to support our update of our transportation plan. And you can see up there, I have a little note saying $120,000 is being reappropriated. We budgeted money that we're not going to get to spend on a consulting activity this year. We're actually going through the selection process. We did leave some funds in that, thinking that it may kick off in September or October, but probably not going to. So that kind of, if you look at the previous years, it kind of shows we had that $120,000 in 17, and now it's in 18. It's really one amount of money that is just transferring forward. So hopefully we will get back to some of the historic numbers that you see in the previous years, which off the top of my head are around $200,000 a year for a budget, as opposed to like $460, whatever it was this year, or $360 for this year. So that's what's going on when you look at those numbers there. Most of the activities we do are for all of the jurisdictions in the area, and I'd like to reiterate that the board of directors, they're the ones that have approved what is being presented today in terms of the budget. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Okay. I know it's not going to be this easy, is it? One of our divisions is the neighborhood, let me hit the button here, is the neighborhood services division. That has 3 different accounts in it: the redevelopment and grants, community development block grants, and property maintenance, which is also code enforcement. So I'm going to go through the grants and redevelopment and the community development block grant, and then I'm going to, for your ease and not have to skip back and forth in the budget book, come back to the property maintenance one. Altogether, we have 6 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. You can kind of see up there that we have the half FTE here and there. The staff will work in one budget item and another, so we have several people or a couple people that are split between line items, so it's kind of hard to delineate one person really working in one area. The first one is grants and redevelopment. I believe y'all are familiar with several of the programs in Old Town. We administer those. The solid waste, recycling contracts, and household hazardous waste, we deal with those also. The total budget is $231,000. And one thing we did do in terms of a budget request this year, and it may have not been a wise thing to do since we don't have the grant yet, but we were anticipating applying for 2 grants, and we're in the process of going to attend a workshop next week. The Historic Preservation Fund through DNR, we're eligible, and we're going to apply for 2 grants. One is to actually develop a historic preservation plan, and the other is to do a historic property survey. That budget amount that we did request is based on a previous survey that was done out off of Moreau for that historic district destination. And I'd be glad to answer any questions on this.
Looks like you're getting by without very many questions. Go ahead.
I'm ready for questions.
Okay. Council Lady.
I'm sorry. You had mentioned the different plans. I don't think you mentioned the South Side plan. Are you anticipating?
In what regard? The South Side plan has been but in planning and zoning they've adopted it as part of the comprehensive plan.
But as far as being able to
implement and do
Implement.
things. Yes, I'm sorry. I got wound up and went so fast. Let me go back to planning and talk a little bit about the budget request there. Sorry, I skipped forward. We had 2 budget request items in there. One was an update to the comprehensive plan. That plan was adopted in 1996. A shelf life of a plan like that, 10 years maybe. So it's twice, 2.5 times its shelf life. We had budgeted about $250,000 to do the plan over a 2-year period, and we requested the first year's amount of money as one of the items. The other item was an additional planner. There are several items that we would like to actually address with that additional planner. If you recall, I mentioned we have current planning and long-range planning. The long-range planning is something that actually kind of gives away to current planning when a crisis occurs, or a planning crisis, if you will. But, you know, we have to triage what we work on. So this staff person in the past, and we will have more flexibility with what we've done with the planning manager position. But the planner 1-2 position that we're looking forward to possibly staffing would do things like the Capitol Avenue Conservation Overlay District. Proactive things that are in these plans, and I have a whole sheet. I'm not going to read it to you. I can send it to you. But things such as the South Side, as you were alluding to, there's, and it was actually identified back in the comprehensive plan, there are several areas that are zoned incorrectly. We have a lot of single-family houses that are zoned multifamily, and that's something that's actually identified in the South Side plan. There's several items from the East Side neighborhood plan that we'd like to implement too. So we have a whole list, and I would be glad to go through it if you like. But there's a lot of items that would be proactive that would address a lot of the issues that we have to take care of sort of when we get a call or concern about why is this happening. Well, let's go see. Well, it was recommended we do it way back when. We just haven't gotten around to doing it. So basically planned implementation is what we'd like to pursue, as opposed to we'd like to update the comprehensive plan and then also pursue more progressive implementing the items in the plan, previous plans.
And that would address as well the one issue that came up with the Central East Side Plan about its adoption in 2004 or 5, and the possible need for it to be updated.
Yeah, updating the comprehensive plan. If we didn't get the money to actually outsource it, that's what that first budget request was for. The planner would help update the comprehensive plan, all the other plans. Hopefully the idea would be when we redo the comprehensive plan, we kind of take a step back at all these plans that are adopted by reference into the comprehensive plan, like the East Side plan and whatnot like that. So it'd be almost like a, I don't want to say clean slate, but we'd look at all the issues that have been arising from all these other plans being developed. Neighborhood planning is another one. You know, there's High Street we'd like to address. Downtown has no protections like the Capitol Avenue area, so someone could come in right now with the existing zoning and build a very large skyscraper. If you can imagine if we were having the growth that Columbia is doing, what our downtown could look like without any of those protections in place. So through zoning, we could put in those types of regulations and design guides for future building and what you can do with those properties too. There's a lot of administrative things we'd like to address too. Our PUD districts, you know, you all get a lot of PUD cases. Well, when there's a minor little change in a PUD, plan unit development, that has to go through that whole process of planning and zoning and to the city council, where it may be a very small change. We'd like to take a look at things like that we might be able to present options to sort of unclog the pipes in planning and zoning and the council. So that's what hopefully this planner would do, is some of those more let's get ahead of the game type things, as opposed to we're working on what's going on right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I believe I was here at the Community Development Block Grant item. So this is the placeholder grant that I was talking about, and it's a placeholder because we just got our 2017 allocation last month, or actually we're in the process of working on that now, so that's sort of the lag time. The program allows us to do things with homeowner assistance, assist with down payments, code deficiency issues, energy efficiency issues, emergency assistance for folks that qualify. The program has to be spent on low to moderate income areas. The majority of the program has to. The amount is $212,000, and we do things. There's two classifications of demolitions in our world. One is voluntary. So this program also addresses voluntary demolitions, which in the past we've worked very closely with Habitat. So when there's a house someone may donate to Habitat, we may step in and help with the actual demolition of it, which helps meet our goals of providing housing to low-income individuals and families. We also recently, actually I think it's under construction now, over on Broadway by South School, North to South School, we're funding a sidewalk project so that children do not have to go across the street, over a hill, and then back across. So those are the types of things that this program helps fund. We do have a consolidated plan. We will be updating that in the future. We do a lot of public involvement. How do people want to see these funds spent? So we use that as input for our planning activities. I mentioned the Mid-Missouri Regional Planning Commission. They're helping us with a report we have to do, the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing report. This is a similar report to what we used to do in the past that we actually consulted out, but they're helping us with a lot of the legwork, and we'll be doing that in-house. So we are getting some benefit from that relationship with the Mid-Missouri Regional Planning Commission. There are no performance measures on this one. They're sort of tied in on the previous one, but I'd be glad to answer any questions or go through any.
I have a quick question.
Councilman Graham.
Didn't I hear on the news that there were some rumblings about ending this CDBG grant?
Yes. We haven't heard anything official, and that is why historically we've put that in as a placeholder until we know we actually get the funds. Mm-hmm. I believe we carry a balance from the previous year, which helps cover the expenses that we're incurring as we're going forward. Okay. But it's a very popular program with both Democrats and Republicans. I'm not in a position to say what's really going to happen, but we're being optimistic. Our dollar amount did decrease, I believe, by 7% from the previous year. So
it wasn't a positive conversation that I heard.
Yeah. Jamie Abbott may have some comments on this too.
Okay.
Historically, the community development block grant has always been on the chopping block. The program hasn't been a block grant since 1974 and has historically been refunded each year through the budget process. Our 2017 funds were on the chopping block, as you indicated in the news, and it got funded. And they're already talking about the 2018 budget. It's still right now is being talks of funded. So it just, Congress, from what I read earlier today, went ahead and went above and beyond of increasing funding for these HUD programs. So I don't anticipate this program going away anytime in the next year or so.
I'm going to move ahead to environmental health is actually the next item that is in your budget book. Those are we have 3 inspectors. You can see all the activities they have up there, but basically they inspect facilities such as restaurants, food trucks, when you have a vendor coming in with a carnival, something like that, child care facilities. They actually have a contract to do various other activities with places that the state or county might be responsible for inspecting. They also do building plan review for restaurants that come in to be sure that the building is going to meet the requirements. They also respond to issues when there's outbreaks. They support Cole County Health Department and the state in those activities. They also administer or manage the compost site budget. That contract is going to, 2018 is the last year for the existing contract. We will be working on a new one. Actually, we're going to have a lot of public involvement about what people are using and what their needs are with that, so we can craft a more appropriate request for proposal for that activity. About half the budget is with that compost site, a little bit less than half, excuse me, and about 46% actually covers the staffing. I'd like to note that we appreciate the new vehicle that you guys approved in a budget request. That is appreciated. And I'd like to note out, too, that part of those cost recovery that I mentioned at the very beginning, about $91,000 comes from the inspection fees that these folks do. Be glad to answer any questions. Thank you. Property maintenance. These are the folks that respond when I get a call or email from somebody with an issue with weeds, vehicles, whatnot like that. A lot of our calls are on rental properties, but I'd like to point out the numbers up there under property maintenance activities. For all of 2016 fiscal year, we had 1,670 approximately violations that we wrote up and notified the offender. So far, through October through June, we've addressed 2,064. We're on track to hit hopefully 3,000 since we're in the tall weeds and grass season. So we have done very well on our enforcement activities. I'd also like to say kudos to our 3 inspectors. All 3 are now certified to inspect the structure itself, not just the outside of the property, so they've been going through training and ramping up on that. The budget is $331,000. We have 3 full-time property inspectors, 2 part-time, and this division shares 1 FTE, an administrative position, with another budget item. We requested 3 different items here, and one was for more abatement money. In the first quarter of this year, we spent all of our 2017 budget of $15,000. You'll see that so far, year to date, we spent $35,000. We transferred money out of our demolition account to take care of abatement. That is sort of some of the triage we have to do. But you'll notice also that while in 2016 for abatements we spent $37,000, recovered $48,000. I mean, there's a lag time. We put liens on properties. But what I'm pointing out is so far this year we recovered $32,000. Money towards abatement has a good return on it because of the process we go through once we actually abate a nuisance and place a tax lien on the property if the property owner does not pay for that. So I'd like to point that out. We also, our demolition budget, we'd like to increase that from $40,000 to $80,000 for next year. We have 5 houses on the waiting list. One alone cost about $6,000 for abatement of the exterior. We believe that one will be very expensive to demolish. Several of these houses are full of trash and waste and things like that that actually could become more of a nuisance if someone gets in there, or they could actually be noxious, if you will. But that's another item we requested. And then we wanted to also get ahead of the game, and with the mailing, we wanted to be proactive and inform people out there, homeowners, landlords, renters, of what their rights are and expectations in terms of property maintenance. And the idea would be we would send out a postcard saying, here's the top 5 items that people normally have issues with that we address, and hopefully try to make them aware that what they may be doing may not be allowable under city code, and then sort of follow up in that neighborhood. So we really want to try to reduce the abatements and reduce the offenses that we actually have to enforce. So those are just the items that we have requested, and just wanted to explain those to you. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
This, I don't know if this is covered under this budget, but the Southside Plan, one of the recommendations was occupancy permits have, is that a resource issue, or is that a?
That is probably a will of the council in terms of we don't have an ordinance for, you're talking about the rental conservation or rental inspection. Yes, and one thing that we're sort of optimistic about, if something like that was put in place, I would hope, and I feel very strongly that our performance increase in terms of what we're doing with all the property violations, that we would actually be able to, through efficiencies, actually start a rental inspection program without any additional staff. It might be good to have some maybe technology or look at the process of how we want to pursue that, but we're out there anyway. It'd be nice if we could actually inspect a property. There's several different models that we're actually going to, that's on our to-do list, is to develop a recommendation and go through the proper process. But there's several different models of doing a rental inspection program. And I was talking to a gentleman just the other day to kind of get feedback. He's a property owner. He's just purchased several pieces of property in the city. A lot of them may not be what we think is the best pieces of property, but I kind of threw the idea at him and, got some feedback. But I explained to him that you can be really hardcore in terms of what you're trying to do with the rental inspection program, but I explained to him that we're just trying to address the issues of properties that are not safe for people to live in. Y'all have probably seen the pictures of light fixtures with water in them and things like that. So once I kind of went through my conversation, he's like, that makes sense because that would increase our property values. Some rental property might be converted back to single-family property, and that's one reason it was recommended in the South Side plan. It was also recommended, I believe, in either the East Side plan or the comprehensive plan. So it's not a new idea, and with so much rental property, we really are going to be pursuing that, bringing that forward to the appropriate committee and then to the council of some of our ideas.
Good. Councilman Graham.
Does Columbia have this program?
Yes, sir. They do, and that is probably on the more stringent side. They actually inspect every time there is a tenant turnover. When I did some work on a house for my father, they even go as far as dictating what sort of electrical type of wiring you need to connect a dryer to the outlet. So that's probably on the more progressive, more regulated side, but yes, they do, and I don't know how many inspectors they have. We're actually going to try to have a conversation with them to see actually more detail about what they're doing, but they do.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Environmental health I covered, and then I guess building regulations is the last one I have here. One of the big things they've been working on this year is adoption of the 2015 building codes. You can see under the ongoing activities, they do a lot of inspections and plan reviews. And if you kind of look at the numbers, you see as you get towards the end of the building process, in terms of certificates of occupancy, and that's one of our performance measures. So the issue is we're not getting called out for these inspections. We did request a plan reviewer to help us with our plan review process. We appreciate that being funded. That's coming from 2 existing part-time positions. But we also requested a vehicle which was funded. We appreciate that. But unfunded was a mechanical inspector and an additional building inspector. The mechanical inspector, mechanical code, hopefully will be adopted. It's going to be presented as part of the building code updates to the council. But the mechanical inspector can actually add value to the construction of or installation of the mechanical systems to buildings. But then also that can be done through certifications through the installer, or it could be the consulting activity. But the building inspector would hopefully help some of this proactive and keeping on track of people that are not getting the proper inspections. But we are not doing too well on our certificates of occupancy. So I'll just point that out to you. They do have a budget of $505,000. The cost recovery number of $284,000 was actually for 2016 when there was only 4 staff. That budget includes the transfer of the administrative technician into this budget item, and also that plan reviewer. So that cost recovery would actually be a higher percentage that what you mathematically could calculate here. I'd be glad to answer any questions regarding this division.
Council Lady Ward.
The line item on dues and publications, there's a $5,000 increase. Could you explain?
I believe that is
what
to purchase
entails?
the 2018 building codes.
Okay.
We go through a cycle, so we're going to get those and start going through that again, but you have to have them to start
Right,
reviewing
correct.
them.
I knew it was something that was due to be bought or.
And that also includes probably a set of books for the plan reviewer, too.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do want to go back to the performance measures on number 5. It seems to me, I think you mentioned it, that our staffing levels helped. From last year, we approved a position that, and I believe you're at 43% of this one, and now you're at 64 and projected to be at 95% on the top one, number 5, or item number 5. And that's useful because if we get a question with regard to delay, this shows that we're making progress, and in some cases, it'd be atypical for them to have a delay over 15 days or something. So I certainly appreciate this item, and I appreciate how the budget is reflected in improving those items as you pointed out.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I'd like to go back to, I had a question I didn't address, and there's one on page 184, number 11, the difference in why that went down so much.
Okay. I'm sorry, my page numbers are not consistent here. Which budget is that?
It's a performance. 184, number 11.
Oh, here we go. Thank you, Public Works.
We're here to support.
So I'm going to let Jamie answer this one because I'm not sure of why the reason the cases pursued in court went down.
I'm going to be real honest here. So our Springbrook system, we have to manually count, cases pursued. And so in 2016, I took over the division, and so how things were accounted for and identified may have been differently how it was done previously. So I do see in 2016, 122 in 2017 actual, so that's through May. So that's 7 months, I believe, 7 months into the year. I would probably say is because we haven't hit the weed season just yet. The May, June, July typically becomes our increased summons and all that for individuals who are repeat offenders and or the ones that we just cannot get to respond to our notices for nuisance violations. So it's probably a combination of those two items.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
So,
You have some-
I don't know if you finished. You getting ready to leave this one? I just wanted to reemphasize that to me, all the positions are certainly important, but the planner position here was probably my highest priority that was not funded. So all the positions and all the departments are important, but the planner one was important from a longer range perspective and many of the things that Sonny mentioned.
I'm trying to find that pink sheet item. Was that
It's on the pink sheet, on the big sheet, and there's several positions, several items, vehicles and people and all kinds of things. And I just want to make sure that was, just pointed that out. Not to the exclusion of anything else, it's just a matter of priorities with all the other things that are on there.
Okay. Yes, Council Lady Ward.
Sorry. And you may have addressed this already, but this year, how is our process going to go as far as if we would like to see something funded? Are we going to do a parking lot, or are we going to do like we did last year and have a way to fund it by pulling something else? Or do you know that yet? It may be too preliminary to...
Well, the observation last year was that we started on the parking lot early, and by the time we got to the last department, we were kind of out of money and ideas, and so we made the decision, I think, last year to bring up the parking lot near the end. So what I'd ask is that you ask the items that you want to bring forward, and please bring them forward when we've concluded with departmental presentations. At least that's the direction I'm heading, unless I get a mutiny of some sort here. Yes, Rick?
So does that mean there does not have to be an offset?
No, I didn't say that part.
Oh, okay.
Sooner or later there does, yeah.
I think we let people put things on and then give a couple of weeks or at least a period of time to find an offset. They didn't have to actually come up with it that night, if I remembered right. Yeah. Okay. If we're all comfortable with that, I think we'll proceed with Public Works. Is that up?
Yeah, and as Matt Marash is on vacation, and I think timing-wise, it's probably going to take a little bit more than 20, 25, 30 minutes. Britt is here, able to respond. We could certainly go through it, but it might have to end up in the middle. So I don't know if there's some other shorter budgets that might be worth going over if you're so inclined.
Well,
Ms. Marash will be back next week.
Sure.
Don't know if Margie's got some thought.
Do we have any preparation for any of the budgets that are from finance that are items?
Well, we can go through some of those small funds if you want to. There's not a lot to it.
We have two
your
options
pleasure.
to do that, or to adjourn. So what's the pleasure of the council? Okay, I think we got a green light to at least hit a few of the small ones.
Yeah, good.
We're just warming up with questions, though.
Well, to finish up the general fund, after the Public Works tabs, there's the transfers and subsidies. It starts on page 245. And there you'll see the transfer to the TIF fund and the transfers for the airport subsidy and the transit subsidy.
So just for clarification, that means that there's a hunk of money that's coming out of the general fund into those identified funds. So it helps support general funds, helping to support, which is not atypical. I mean, to help support those funds.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, Councilman Graham?
But that was also to, for like maintenance and all those type things was part of that transfer funds as well? Did we put that to show the full amount of money that's being transferred?
I'd say it's to help indicate the full amount of money that goes towards the operation of that particular department. Transit, for example, and it's just as an example, it includes the administrative fee and all the things that go along with that. So when we get to transit, you can see the full picture of the operations necessary to operate that particular department, the full amount of money necessary to operate that department, and of which these amounts are coming from the general fund to assist. So it does include all of the operation, the maintenance, and all those kinds of things. Understanding, though, that there's some items in, for example, sales tax, again, using a transit example, to use money to buy buses and those kinds of things.
The next tab that has an amount in it is the capital projects tab on page 248, and this is the where the building or infrastructure sinking fund is at. So in 2017, it was 300,000, and in 2018 is 200,000. And I believe Steve made a comment that he would like for it to be 300,000, but this is what was put in it for FY18.
And I think that shows up in section 3 of our expense, and it shows up in the forecast under the purple line.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Other question? Councilman Prather has a question.
So is there a reason why we have $100,000 less in there this year?
The decision to fund it based on the available revenues.
That there are
It was
other
a funding
things that are more
decision.
important than that, basically, or?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
If we want to move on to tab 3, we can go over some of the sales tax, the capital improvement sales tax.
And we're bypassing tab 2 because they're bigger, or you just?
Mr. Marash will be covering the airport
those are
transit
his-
and wastewater.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Tab 3, page
So
314.
sales tax F will not have a 2018 budget request. That was finalized in FY17. And sales tax G, we've got $5 million. That's the annual estimate for that capital improvement sales tax. And you'll see the projects that are outlined starting on page 326.
I'll give people a chance to look at that. Page 326, the items on the lower portion of that. I'm going to ask a question with regard to any gleaning. Is there, have we gleaned out, I don't know what the term to use, of the previous sales tax? Or are there still some money available from the previous sales tax?
That's true, and we're doing a reconciliation, but there are still some projects that are being, that are using the cash from sales tax F. What we can tell at this point, it's going to be close to $1 million.
Now, is some of that somewhat restricted to a project that the voters voted on? Or is that in excess of the voter kind of approved
It
items?
would still have the restrictions of the purpose of the tax.
Okay. Well, I do remember one of the ads for one of the sales tax, and I can't even tell you which one it was. It could have been E as far as that's concerned, did say riverfront access, for instance. And that money was there specifically because voters voted on it back then. And I assume that money is brought forward each year, or it's still held out there.
Prior sales tax dollars are allocated for those projects, and those are carried forward
Okay.
by those particular projects amounts.
Okay. And then a deeper dive in this would specifically identify what projects those are going towards, right?
I think,
Councilman Hussey.
Councilman, so I think you're asking two different questions here. I think that the gleaning the $1 million left over is really an excess of the projects were completed as defined in sales tax F.
Right.
And yet there is extra revenues just because the sales tax generated more.
And at this point, it's not budgeted.
You're referencing more, there was money set aside in a previous sales tax for a particular project. Those dollars were never spent, and so those dollars still sit there. And so like the riverfront access.
But they carry forward.
Yeah.
But they carry forward,
Yeah.
so.
They're
that-
restricted.
But the
They're
$1 million then, it's
Yeah.
extra revenue from
Is-
sales
yeah,
tax.
Exactly.
How restricted, is it restricted in the context of the intent of that sales tax in the sense that, but some of that language is fairly broad as well.
I think that's a question for us to answer later.
Okay.
If you're okay with that. I understand the question.
Okay.
So I thought we answered that one first, but I think there's some interpretation, I think some discussion. I think it's up to council's discretion on how to use that money over and above what's been identified for sales tax, but it probably takes a little closer look at the particular sales tax that was approved.
And then would we, as a council or a staff, need to sort of look at the projects that were identified and make sure that they were complete to a certain standard? Does that make sense too? I mean, I wouldn't want somebody to say, wait a minute, you claim that you completed this project, but you didn't really complete it to the fullest extent that we thought it should be.
We close out projects, and then when they're closed out, then that's where we look at the additional money that may be available for this gleaning exercise. So I think the question becomes later on for council is how to allocate that gleaned money and for which projects you want to use that. And we had a discussion, I think, at Finance Committee not too long ago where several projects were discussed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead and proceed.
Okay. There are a couple of funds under tab 4 if you'd like to go ahead and cover those as well. The first one is the self-funded workers' comp fund, and you won't see very many changes here.
Isn't this the one that we want to?
Yeah, earlier in the year we experienced a lot of claims, so we didn't make changes in FY18 for those things that are happening in FY17, so there could be a chance of coming back to council if this fund runs short.
And on the projects that I just previously mentioned that were given to, I think it was Finance Committee a number of months ago, one of those items was the workers' comp fund on there. So it was identified. It's probably a fund that needs to be built back up for the purposes that Margie just mentioned.
I don't want to jump ahead too much, but do we have a related item on Monday's council meeting?
We do, related to health insurance and wellness.
So
which is separate, different than this. This is different than the workers' compensation. It's when an employee gets hurt on the job.
Okay, I thought this was the pool.
No, this is a pool, but different than that pool.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Actually, it's the next tab.
Okay.
The self-funded health insurance tab.
Okay.
You won't see a budgeted amount there because basically the every personnel section has that group health insurance budgeted in that line. So it's the revenues are coming in from the employees' share from the paycheck and then going right back out on the medical claims. So it's a wash. Tab 5 is parks, so we'll bypass that.
One question. I was expected to see an unrestricted amount that's the pool for the employees for the self-funded insurance. I was expecting to see that item here. The amount of money that is restricted as a part of the pool for the self-funded insurance pool.
Yeah, these line items aren't going to show you what the fund balance is. There is a fund balance and it's a restricted fund balance for the self-funded health insurance. Does that answer your question? No, it's not going to be on. That's just general fund. And we've got the CAFR will reflect the ending fund balance. And actually, I did an analysis for Steve that just this week. The audited FY16 fund balance in the self-insurance fund was around $57,000, and at this point in time, it's around $400,000. So we're starting to build that fund up. But our health insurance consultant said that according to standards, it should be around $2 million. So, we've just started this self-funded health insurance, so we're gradually building up our fund balance.
That's a good thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think that's what's, we're going to be asked to make a decision Monday on that.
Correct.
Okay.
So, did you want to keep moving on? Tab 5 is parks. Tab 6 has some of those small, if you want to just get through them.
See a nod, yes.
Okay. So the first one is the J.C. Veterans Plaza Trust Fund. You'll see 2,000 revenue, and that's basically just interest, and then the maintenance and the brick project for that is the 2,000 budgeted under the expenditures. The Police Training Fund, we've got 17,100 in revenues and 17,100 budgeted for police training. And it's basically using all of the fund balance. We just leave a little bit in there. There's not a reserve in those funds.
Is that the one that there's a penny or a couple pennies for some sort of fines that go towards this fund? The revenue source for this?
No.
We spent down a training fund a few years ago, and the thinking was that it needed
there
to
is
be built
some
back.
revenue from court costs. Is that what you're
That's what
referring to?
Okay.
Lodging tax fund is the next tab. So the revenues are $1,113,000. We do keep some of that for administrative fee, but basically it's a transfer to the conference center fund. The City Hall Trust Fund just has some interest income. Fireman's pension, no activity. The USSJC Submarine Trust, you'll see some interest income there. The Woodland Cemetery, got some interest income. And then transfer from surplus of $4,300 to fund the $5,000 cemetery maintenance.
Doesn't appear to
When
be any
a-
questions, so tab 7.
Tab 7 is the TIF fund.
I don't believe we
Any questions?
have any questions with regard to that, at least not now. We kind of ran through some of these fairly quick, and I wouldn't, if you have a question, if anyone on the council has a question, we can address them back at our next meeting, or right now. But I think we're at a point in time where we're...
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, while Mr. Smith is still here, we could probably do airport real quick and perhaps parking real quick, if you would like. If not, then that, I'm sure he'll be prepared as well, but those are fairly straightforward. And
I'd say go ahead. We don't want to shrug you totally for tonight.
I appreciate that, and thanks for the deferral. I think the committee will be well served by having Matt make the majority of the presentation, but I'm happy to talk about some of the divisions of Public Works. And the airport division is where we were going to start. As already been alluded to, that it is an enterprise fund, and the staff is comprised of 3 full-time employees, and then we have 1 part-timer. Total operating budget is a little short of $500,000. And we did have 2 pink sheet items. Neither were funded. One was a reclassification of a position from a maintenance worker to a crew leader, and the second was a replacement of some older equipment. I'm often asked, what does the airport do? And I tried to summarize it here in 3 bullet points. One is to ensure the safe operational environment for the more than 30,000 operations a year. That's 30,000 operations, meaning somebody's taking off or landing at our airport. It is one of the busiest airports in outstate Missouri. We have more takeoffs and landing than Columbia, but they would say they have more emplanements than we do. So it is a healthy competition between the 2 airports, but we support each other well. Columbia Regional Airport, primary focus has been on passenger service, which is a wonderful thing for our region. However, we've been focusing on general aviation, which is kind of highlighted by our second one, is being responsive to their customers' needs, including the owners of over 62 base aircraft and 14 privately owned hangars that are operated out of our airport. A large part of those hangars are operated by a business, Jefferson City Flying, which is is our FBO, fixed base operator at our airport. They do a wonderful business and attract customers from all over the state. They can work on every piece of the aircraft, whether it be Cessna, small single engine aircraft through a jet service. We actually have one of our base aircraft at the airport which can fly nonstop from Jefferson City to Europe. Not many airports of our size can say something like that. Finally, what I believe is what our main goal is to promote economic development and growth within the region. Currently, it's estimated that that investment of the general fund money helps us to create more than $22 million of economic impact to the region. That's a study done privately funded, or I shouldn't say that, it's funded through MoDOT. They look at all the airports in the state. With that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Some of our outcome measures are a little difficult to report on until the year is complete, but happy to answer any questions.
And the airport and parking summaries are on the second sheet of your big sheet, just so you have
I might
that.
add, it seems like our jet service had been going up and up and up. So
That is true. We were actually very fortunate to have an over $7 million investment mostly through grant funds in rebuilding our main runway, and that runway should service us many years into the future, both supporting those civilian jet aircraft, and I didn't even mention our National Guard presence that we have at the airport with the location of, I believe, 2 helicopters that are based there and a King Air, larger aircraft. I'm a former pilot, used to be in the National Guard years ago. I will brag on the airport as every chance I get, so please tell me to shut up whenever it's time to move on.
Thank you.
We'd like to move on and talk about parking.
Sure.
The parking division, again, is an enterprise division within the department. And it's an enterprise division that does very well. We're fortunate to have this as a part of their downtown, in support of our downtown. We try to run it as just another business, another small business within the downtown, and our job is to support those businesses that are located there. The operating budget's almost $900,000. We did have 2 pink sheet item requests. Both were funded in the mayor's budget. One is a replacement of I'm not sure that that's correct. Is it a maintenance truck?
It's the John Deere mowing and snow removal tractor and a mailing machine replacement.
I'm sorry. I don't believe that slide is correct. I might have made a mistake on that. I believe we only had 2 items that were requested. One was a John Deere mower and snow removal tractor, and the other one was is for a portion of the mailing machine replacement here at City Hall. The maintenance truck and the enforcement vehicle were last year. My apologies for not having that slide updated and correct. Currently, we're able to build a fund balance within the division. In other words, we bring in more revenue than we actually spend, than it costs to operate. That fund balance has been growing for a number of years, and the idea of that fund balance is to expand our parking offerings into the future, whether that be additional surface lots or upgrades to our existing system or potentially a new garage. We currently have a study out looking at our parking system that'll be coming forward with some recommendations in the near future. What the division does, we maintain a 540-space parking garage, 74-space parking deck, and then 14 reserve lot, 7 metered lots, and 950 on-street meters. We support a number of the downtown events. It's also my pleasure to represent the city on the Downtown Association Board as part of my duties with this division. We do various things in support by putting up flags for the numerous activities that we have downtown. And then we also provide snow removal activities. Not only do we remove the snow for our own facilities, but we have a contract with the Downtown Association removing the snow from the downtown sidewalks. That's, paid. That is a paid function where the Downtown Association pays us for that activity. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Graham.
Mr. Smith, since you brought it up, I have to ask the question. You talked about your fund balance. What is the amount in your fund balance?
I would have to defer to the exact number, but I believe it's in excess of $4 million at the present time.
This, on the big sheets, the pink sheet summary that you have in the back of your book, in that little pocket, the first page is the general fund, the second page is the airport parking, transit, and wastewater page. And you can see on the parking, the FY16 audited fund balance total was $6,371,869. Of that, there's a restriction of $2,424,468. So the unrestricted is getting close to $4 million.
I revised my answer to say almost $4 million.
Okay, it's pretty good.
Good answer.
I know we purchased some lots. Is that?
We have purchased, there was a housing authority lot,
Yeah.
which we call Lot 26. We purchased, I believe, 2 years ago, maybe 3, from the housing authority. We had been operating that lot for years with a cost share agreement where we were paying them half of our income. We ran the numbers and found that much more to our benefit to just simply pay for that lot and keep our revenues for ourselves.
And
we purchased that with the fund balance money. We spent that fund balance down to purchase that lot.
We can get you that detail.
I'm just curious. That's what we've restricted $2.4 million for.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What the
restricted.
The fund balance is really almost $6.4 million, but 2.4 is reserved for something, restricted for something.
I think it's best that we get that answer for you. I'm not sure I can answer that sitting here either.
So Sheila just brought up the comprehensive annual financial report, and the restriction is $180,595 for pensions and net investments in capital assets of $2,243,873.
Any further questions? Yes, Councilor Ward.
Sorry. This is going back to another item that I had mentioned to you, Steve. The mail machines that we're seeing on here, I think we determined that those aren't actual machines, but they are allocations to use those
Yeah,
machines?
when I
However-
presented the IT budget, there was a pink sheet item that was funded, and it was brought forward by IT because IT does the mailing
Right.
for the city. So that mail machine is, it's reached its useful life, and so the total amount of the machine is $15,000. So the general fund portion of that is in the IT budget of $8,700, and then some of these other funds we've allocated depending on their usage of the mail machine on an annual basis. So you'll see some in parks, you'll see some
Right.
in wastewater and parking.
Okay.
So they're not separate mail machines.
It's one machine, but it's just an allocation between funds.
Okay, well, his pink sheet funded second item says mailing machine
Mhm.
replacement, so I was just confused
Mhm.
on if that's actual equipment or if that's
Yeah.
his portion of.
It's his portion
using
of it, yeah.
The $8,700.
And I think if you go to the actual pink sheet, it has that in the
Okay.
description.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any further questions? I'd entertain a motion to.
So
adjourn.
move.
Second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.
Didn't need that side of the table to get that.